Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for having us. We're delighted to be here. Very grateful for your interest, and hopefully you may have heard of us. We're proud to be the most recognisable estate agency brand across the whole of the UK, and certainly here in London, which is where we are focused with our business. And hopefully today I'll give you a little bit of an overview about what differentiates us in the market, and certainly what's led the turnaround over the last couple of years, and certainly what's been what the outlook is beyond the next couple of years. I'll work out how to use this as we go along. Oh, that's the wrong way. So, a little bit of an overview. We have, in the last 2 years, I've returned back to the business. I'd actually originally had my training at Foxtons going back over 20 years ago. And like many people who came through the gates at Foxtons, we were exposed to a business that was growing very, very quickly. It was the original disruptor in the marketplace, and many of my colleagues from 20 years ago are now running real estate across the UK. Certainly if you look at the likes of Knight Frank, Savills, Chestertons, Strutton Parker, etc., there's probably somebody very close to the top of running those businesses that came through the doors of Foxtons back in those early days. Having returned over the last 2 years, I took over a business that had, which we'll cover in a second, had a little bit of a tumultuous year since 2016. The market itself had changed very rapidly in the UK, and particularly here in London. And really, when you analyse that, the business wasn't quick enough to be able to pivot to a new model, which is really what we've spent the last 2 years very, very intensively working on, and really trying to regenerate and focus the business in an entirely new direction, which is, as you'd expect, focusing on our reoccurring revenues that we generate in our industry from lettings, and making our business much more resilient against the up and down sales cycle. If you look back historically, when we were very much a sales business, we were entirely connected to the up and down volumes of the market, and as we'll show you later on, we've really been able to decouple the outlook of this business. You may recognise our offices. We've got nearly 60 of them across London. We've got I think nearly 400 cars, much to Chris's concern, but they're all generating us huge value today. We've returned the Foxtons Mini back to the road, and that really has helped us as we rebuild the profile of our business across the capital. 70% of recurring lettings income, that's a very, very important number. There have been times in history of Foxtons when it was 60% of sales volumes, and obviously that's what was causing the up and down chop. Now we've very much focused on accelerating our lettings income, and we're proud to have 28,000 lettings tenancies under contract, and that really is the engine room for the profitability and for the determined outlook of profit in the foreseeable future. So very, very keen to be able to continue to accelerate that, and we accelerate that in two ways. We will be growing as we have done. We've returned to organic growth. If you look at the number of units that we're letting each year, we've been able to pivot that from previous underperformance. But also, we're turbocharging that growth through acquisitions. We've got nearly 3,600 estate agents operating within the M25, and there's an enormous consolidation opportunity, and something that we are getting very, very good at is identifying targets, negotiating with them, and trying to bring those businesses in. We quickly bring in the lettings book, and we can create fantastic synergies from those as we move forward. We're led by Nigel Rich. Nigel has led the turnaround of our business. 3 years ago, he was brought in, and that started the change of senior leadership within the business. I was very proud to be asked to come and return back to the business in 2022. Prior to that, I was the CEO of a business called Chestertons. I led a turnaround of that business. I became the CEO shortly after the business was making a £2.5 million loss, and facing many of the same problems that Foxtons had when I returned. I took that business from a £2.5 million loss to a 13 million EBITDA business in the space of around about 4 years. Before that, I've had an entire industry, lots of different industry experience. Chris, you might just want to mention a few words about your own experience.
I've been in the business for 5 years, so I've seen both pre-turnaround and post-turnaround. I stepped up to be CFO in April 2022. Thank you very much. So very much been part of the turnaround and working with Guy, and hopefully tonight you'll see what good work we've been doing and how that's flowing into the figures.
Chris and I are both engineers by education, which is probably why we get on so well. But we've had a very, very busy couple of years, really making sure that the business was future fit, that we were super resilient, and that we can really attack the opportunity within the market to continue to deliver some very exciting growth, which we'll talk about as we go through. So a little bit of a history. Foxtons was founded in 1981 by the legendary John Hunt, and in the first 10 years it was just a normal estate agent on the high streets. Its first office was in Notting Hill. Very quickly, towards the end of the 90s, John had started to realise that there was an opportunity to digitalise many aspects of these very old school processes that the industry was currently underway with, and he started to invest the enormous amount of cash that the business had started to generate into building a digital platform. And that digital platform, internally, we call it BOSS, which is Business Operating Systems. John spent a lot of time and a huge amount of money in the late 90s building this system. And that really has been the foundation for an awful lot of the opportunity that we've used to outperform the rest of the market. And whatever you think about estate agency, I can promise you, if you were to come and visit us at Chiswick Park, you would see an entirely different side to how we operate. You know, we are a highly sophisticated, data-driven business today, and we use this enormous database that we've gathered over the last 20 years, this operational database, not just gathering consumer database. If any of you have ever picked up the phone to Foxtons, you will be on our system, and I hope that you might have received a telephone call more recently asking you if you'd like to do business with us. We've built very sophisticated data platforms over the last 2 years. It's been an area of considerable investment, because I really wanted our business to be able to not only get value out of the historic database, but also to be able to ingest external data sources to be able to give us opportunity-led propensity modelling using AI and machine learning, and that's returning some very, very interesting results, which we can come on to in a second. Going on from I first joined Foxtons in 2002, seems a lifetime ago now, and when I joined, we really were the original property disruptor. Everything we did was different to everybody else on the high street. Many of the siloed functions that were created at Foxtons have now been copied around the industry, and that still is the case today. We rode the incredible wave of the property boom in those early noughties. The business sold to private equity a number of different times before IPOing in 2013. If you look at the branches and the revenue, what is interesting actually is what was happening to the sales volumes during those periods. But you know, going back to the early noughties, sales volumes in London were in the region of 150,000 transactions per year. To put that into context, last year, which was a very poor year for transactions in London, those numbers were around about 80,000. What we've been able to do is to pivot the business away from that sales cycle and even be able to deliver profitable growth even in those tougher years. I joined, again, as we said, in 2022. We had a complete change of the senior management team during that period. We'd had 6 years of decline, certainly if you look at our share price in considerable collapse, as was also our market share in that same vein as well. We've brought through the business, which was always the model at Foxtons. We've brought people who've been in the business right the way through. My senior leadership team today, almost without exception, have come through operating on the ground floor and have worked their way through to the top of the business. And I'm surrounded by people that I believe strongly are the best in the industry. We're running the biggest teams in the industry, and we're certainly now getting back to that core DNA of delivering innovation back to the business, which is something I'm hugely excited about, particularly with what we're doing with tech and data, which is unlike anything else in the industry. Why do we love London? Well, we love London, particularly if you look at the PRS, the private rental, the private rented sector, and you look at that 8% CAGR going back all the way to the year 2000. There really isn't much that I can see on the horizon that is going to dent that long-term growth, and it's always been beating inflation, particularly when you think about the incredible situation that we went through as going through the COVID years. We had a very, very short period where values leveled off, or maybe even came off a very, very small amount, and very quickly, as we all know, over the last year, over the last 2 years, those lettings values rebounded very strongly. We saw nearly 20% growth in lettings values in 2021, 2022, and that's only continued to make sure that that's feeding the value of the business and also the value of that PRS. We talked about a second ago the transaction numbers in London. You can see here that in 2023, down at just 80,000. There was only 2 other times we've seen transaction volumes in London at that level. Once was during the global financial crisis, the other one was during COVID. So it really was a very low year. Obviously, that was fed by the shock interest rate rises, and we expect over the next 2-3 years that those numbers will start to grow back for the sales market, back towards that 10-year average of around about 100,000 transactions. Our growth and our projections, which we'll come on to in a second, are not assuming that we're getting back up to 100,000. It's probably somewhere between the 80,000 and the 100,000. So we're not banking on returning, and what we've been focusing on is returning the business, certainly the sales side of the business, back to profitability, even in these tougher sales markets. To give you an example, a year ago, our sales business lost £10 million. On the flip side of that was a huge amount of profit, £25 million from the lettings department. You have got to have a high-performing sales and lettings business, because at different times of the cycle, each business will feed instructions and opportunities to each other. And certainly if we're determined to go and deliver that organic growth in lettings, a lot of that will come through the sales-led opportunity. So we can't just close sales and be done with it. But we've taken a huge step forward this year already, without much of a rebound in these transaction numbers, to getting back into profit for the sales business. And I'm very confident that we're well on the way to doing that, which we'll see. So, upon my arrival, Chris and I spent 3 months really looking critically at every aspect of the business. I spent time sitting with every department, talking to every single person across the business, and really understanding where the problems were. Shortly after that, we created a new strategic business plan, and within that, we presented to the city in Q1 last year our strategic priorities, but underlining for the first time, I think, ever in Foxtons history, was publicly going out there with our financial targets of getting back to 25 to 30 million pounds of operating profit. We've taken an enormous step forward on that this year, and of course that is led by the 3 main aspects of our business. Lettings, we've talked about delivering that organic growth. It's really important that we can try to do that. That's a bit of a health check. It's very hard to deliver organic growth in lettings if you're not turbocharging it through acquisitive growth. We've become very good at analysing the markets, analysing our competitors, having very early conversations with lots of those 3,600 lettings businesses across London, and negotiating and working with them in partnership to try to make sure that we buy the best available businesses. And we'll show you a slide later on that just shows you how good the returns are, but also how good we've become at bringing those businesses across. It is a really important part of our strategy. In sales, we've taken an enormous step forward. Again, we'll show you this in a second, in our market share. If we can get our long-term market share of exchanges within the market over 4.5%, we know that's very close to getting back to profitability. And we've taken a huge step forward this year. Financial services, we own a business called Alexander Hall. That is where all of our front office mortgage referrals go to. Obviously, that is very often in line with the performance of that business is very in line with the sales transactions, but it also has 50% of its revenue, not just on the front office new mortgages that we're arranging, but also from the nice reoccurring remortgage business as people come to the end of those terms. So, 2016 to 2022, it was really a period, I think, of long-term underperformance, but also stagnation for the business. We weren't investing in headcount, we weren't investing in technology, and the business was really kind of being managed for year-to-year profitability targets rather than investing for the future. The key areas of our rebuild, the technology platform, this BOSS system, which gives us an enormous advantage in the marketplace. To put this into context, the vast majority of UK estate agents use an off-the-shelf platform. That off-the-shelf platform is like using Windows 98 versus the latest iOS system that we have, which is entirely built bespoke for our business. It gives us an enormous advantage for anything from when we did decide to deliver new innovations, and we've delivered some really fantastic products over the last 2 years that we're really excited about. For example, one of them, we delivered the first ever digital end-to-end lettings platform in the UK. This means that our clients who are looking to let a property through us can do so entirely on a digital platform today if they don't want to go out, or maybe they're overseas and they want to be doing that through a digital platform. They can view, they can offer, they can have their offer accepted, and they can fill all of their forms in entirely digitally. And that system is also fed with propensity modelling to help us make sure that we can deliver the right properties to the right tenants in the shortest space of time. So really reducing that transaction time as much as we can, because in London, the most important part of the lettings business is speed. We've got to be the first to list, and we have to be the first to be able to close a deal. So everything we're doing with technology on the letting side is about really reducing that time of transaction whilst growing aggressively the market share. We have built an entirely separate data platform that uses all of the data and all of the 20 years of historic data from our operating system. We decided we worked in conjunction with Microsoft. All of our tech stack is in Microsoft. We've placed all of the data into a state-of-the-art Microsoft Azure stack, which allows us now to be able to use off-the-shelf AI plugins to interrogate the data. And we've got billions of data points. We're able to then start to propensity model across many aspects of the business, whether it's recruitment, whether it's trying to make sure that we're dealing with the right clients as quickly as possible, or whether it be prospecting across the entire group to make sure that we're growing the market share quickly enough. Many of that prospecting power or that machine learning is now being done within that Microsoft stack. It really gives us a huge advantage in the marketplace. We've invested enormously in the brand. As I said, we've returned 400 Minis to the streets of London. Those cars were already operating in London, but they were just unbranded, low-value cars that our employees didn't like. And for a very small, I think, incremental cost, don't ask Chris, we get huge value from seeing those Minis on the road. We've also massively improved the look and the feel of our offices. We've brought an entirely new marketing team in who have helped us rebuild a slightly more punchy approach to how we're going out to market. And I believe passionately that we should be leaning into our latent awareness of Foxtons, which is an agent that you come to if you want to get the best result. And that ultimately is what we're trying to deliver for our clients. We have a hub and spoke model. We have a fantastic head office at Chiswick Park. It really is part of our secret sauce, and it's where we have these highly siloed, super efficient departments that do one function very, very well and then pass on in the next part of the process to a different department. And that really has been, I suppose, in the DNA of Foxtons for 20 years, but we're now using tech and data to turbocharge those independent and individual siloed departments to really improve productivity and performance. And training and culture. I'm a product of the benefit of starting in a business that had an incredible culture. Whatever you think about Foxtons, back in the day, the culture was unbelievable. And it's what made us work super hard. We were working long hours. We were working many days a week, but we were determined to deliver the right result. And I think that's core for me, for what I want everybody in our business to think is important. I don't want us to be embarrassed to be estate agents. I don't want us to be embarrassed about being a sales organisation. We celebrate success. We make sure that that's recognised. And I think that's a really important fundamental piece of what we're trying to rebuild back into the business, and it's certainly started to yield some really great results with retention of staff, with productivity per head. All of these metrics are considerably up over the last 2 years, and ultimately that's going to continue to help us grow that market share and outperform the market, just as we've done over the last two years. So the proof points. So what about this data? How we've rebuilt all of these systems. We've delivered propensity modelling. This is the result of what we've delivered. I joined the business in September 2002. Upon joining the business, we had an entirely different view to how we were structuring and focusing every single person in the business. And Chris has heard me say this 1,000 times. I want everybody, including Chris's department, including our finance team, our back office, our front office, their primary role is to help us find opportunities to sell or let properties for clients. And if we have that mindset, the whole machine, everything else that we're doing, all the clever bits in the background, all of the processes will help us convert that market share into money, into revenue for the business, one way or another. But it all starts by having the sales and lettings instructions. We've completely re-geared how we've incentivized finding properties and finding these new opportunities across the group. We've rebuilt this propensity modelling that uses the 4.5 million contacts in our database to try to give us a much, much better opportunity-led lead scoring device for our prospecting team, and that's delivered some really incredible results. These results in sales, for example, and for lettings are unlike anything that's been seen in the market. In fact, Rightmove confirmed to us last year that they've never seen this level of growth for a medium or large-sized agency before. They were very, very, very surprised that we're able to move the dial just so quickly. This took us from a position of 2 or 3 within the London market to not only last year being confirmed as the fastest growing UK estate agent for both sales and lettings, but also reclaiming our position in London as the largest lettings brand and the largest sales brand, something that we're hugely proud of to deliver that in such a short space of time. The results of this is really trying to build a business that is very resilient. We see here 2020, 2019, you can see the sales volumes in the business, but you can see the profitability of where Foxtons was at the time. As we've pivoted away very, very quickly to accelerate our growth in lettings, really focusing on that high volume and highly repetition, high quality revenue, that's enabled us to really grow the profitability, whilst also still now trying to build out a much more successful, profitable sales business. That bridge will take us all the way through to our medium-term target, which we're comfortable of still talking about between 25 to 30 million pounds of operating profit. We think that will happen in the next couple of years. So, the operating platform, you've heard me talk a lot about the BOSS system, but it really is genuinely, completely unique in the industry. And this allows us to have a big advantage over our competition. That tech platform also allows us to be able to integrate new businesses at a completely different rate to any of our competitors. We can interrogate a database on a Friday. We can send our team of experienced programmers and within the business into a business and interrogate, even if they have a bespoke system. And it allows us to be able to bring over and map all of their data and all of their clients and all of their contracts. And on Monday morning, when we start the computers, everything's been brought over to the Foxtons system. We can do that in a weekend. That takes many of our competitors years to be able to integrate and bring those businesses across. So it's a huge advantage. The data platform we've talked about, this will continue to deliver further advantages within the marketplace, particularly as we start to see even more AI products and come out with even more propensity modelling internally as the machine is learning every month as we go along, because there's a constant feedback loop into the algorithms that we've built in-house. Our brand, we continue to invest in the brand, and it's certainly a very important mile stick for us to make sure that we constantly improve our position within the marketing and within the London agency environment. And of course, we are recognisable, very recognisable across the UK, and that does deliver some opportunities beyond the medium term, which we're focusing mainly on London. We've talked about hub and spoke. People and culture. We've increased our headcount over the last 2 years by around about, our fee earning headcount's been increased by about 20%. I've also returned to a very, very strong focus on face-to-face training. In fact, last year we delivered a 10-fold increase in face-to-face sales training for our employees. That's had an immediate effect of making our new starters and our employees who have been here between 1 to 2 years far more productive than they were in the past, even despite a very tough market last year. So that investment in people is critical. We need to have the very best people in the marketplace. We're also spending an enormous amount of time at the moment thinking about our outward marketing of the employment opportunity to the outside world. We want to increase the number of university grads. Again, me being a product of that, reaching out to universities, explaining the opportunities that are not just within Foxtons but within the industry, and really trying to secure a higher quality of employee that's joining the business. And culture, trying to make sure that we are focused on this high intensity but modern version of what really an estate agent should be.
We've got about 12 minutes left. Wrap it up soon and
sure.
We can get into some questions.
No problem at all. Chris, you might just want to touch very quickly on the opportunity for acquisitions.
Yeah, we'll do. Just briefly on this. Lettings acquisitions, as Guy mentioned, is a really important part of our growth strategy. I thought I'd just highlight what we've been doing since 2020. We've spent around 50 million on lettings acquisitions. That's across 7 great brands in London, really good quality businesses. And we put the Foxtons stamp on those businesses, rebranded them. And the numbers are impressive. 9,500 tenancies acquired. We're acquiring at about 3.1 times EBITDA. That's well below the Foxtons multiple. EBITDA margin post synergies talking about 50%, and that's really an indicator or illustrative of the Foxtons platform and how we can onboard them, strip out a good amount of synergies, and deliver a good growth, and ultimately that return on investment, 25%, well above our weighted average cost of capital. So opportunity-wise, a question you might ask is, well, what's the opportunity in London? Well, Guy mentioned there's over 3,000 agencies in Greater London, and that's before we start going out into major commuter towns. The top 11 represent 24% of the market. So there's a long tail for us to go out, lots of opportunity. We're well financed, good backing from our banks, and ultimately generate a lot of cash, particularly from our lettings business. Just popping on to the next slide, you might ask, well, how do we deliver that growth from acquisitions? 2 things. You've got the revenue growth and the cost synergies. Revenue growth very much comes from getting to those businesses, frankly, running them better, but uplifting off-market rentals. Often these privately owned companies are not really getting the best for their landlord, the best results. We're able to do that. We're able to improve landlord retention, and also mine the data. So mine the data, get new lead opportunities from those businesses. Cost synergies, these are delivered very quickly, and it really is by improving the productivity of those people, cutting down overheads, management costs, consolidating branches, marketing, and so on and so on. That's how we very quickly turn these loss-making businesses or barely profit-making businesses. On the right-hand side there is a real business we acquired, a company called Gordon & Co. EBITDA of around 0.2 million when we acquired it. After driving some revenue growth of 38%, taking out over £1 million of cost and investing in better incentives for the staff, we've managed to turn that into 2.7 million annualised EBITDA. That's just a really quick example of seeing how the acquisition story combined with the organic story, which is part of the turnaround, drives good growth. Back to you, Guy.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. I'm not going to read it all out. We are a highly motivated team of senior management. I think that when I look across the industry, I can't think of a better management team that I'd want to work with. We've got a very, very strong plan that we all believe in entirely. And I think certainly if you look at our performance over the last 2 years, that enormous growth that was unseen of before in the marketplace, we're very, very determined and very, very sure that we can go and deliver on that medium-term plan.
Thank you, Guy. Questions?
Use that one now.
Yes, thank you, Guy, for an excellent, enthusiastic presentation. You've emphasised the importance of lettings revenue to the business. Asking you a question now, is there not a dark political cloud on the horizon that certain members of the Labour movement, government and London Mayor in particular, are toying with talking again of some sort of rent freeze or rent caps what impact would that have on the company, and is there any way you can get around that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, we look to other markets and other locations and other jurisdictions where we've seen some of these rent caps coming in. If you look at Scotland, the function that they brought in, these rules often have unintended consequences, but actually, since bringing in the rules, the prices have gone up more in Scotland than they have anywhere else. Such is the way that it is difficult to control a market where you've got a potentially limited amount of stock. To put it into context, we register each year 600,000 tenants looking to rent from us. At any one time, normally, we might have up to 2,000 or 2,500 properties available in any one given time as you go across the time gap. So I think the long-term fundamentals of the market are very, very secure. We talk very regularly to our client base of 28,000 landlords. We have recently inquired with them that would legislative changes be a reason for you to look to sell. And there's a very, very small number of our clients that are not in this for the long run and don't view their property investment perhaps as a long-term pension type investment for them.
Thank you. Hi. This is quite a cheeky question, but historically, I'm going to say that Foxtons were perceived as not paying their staff very well and the staff having to work on very high commissions, and so that made them so punchy and really wanting to put the sales through. And there was concern that were they really going to do the best job for the person, for the property, or were they just going to make the sale?
Yeah.
How have you addressed that?
Well, you have to remember that our client is the seller. And that's very, very clear in everything that we do. We work for the seller to get the best results. I am a function of being on a £10,000 basic for my whole first 5 years in the industry working at Foxtons. You're on a commission structure. Today, that's entirely different. We pay minimum wage. That basic salary is much, much, much higher. There is still a commission element, and we want that commission element to be a fair reflection of the work that somebody does. But ultimately, our 600 front office negotiators are employed and motivated and trained to deliver the right result for our clients.
Two questions, if I may. One is on the acquisition strategy. I understand Dexter's private equity-backed, quite aggressive on the acquisition front. How is it competing with that environment? And the second one is, given the brand positioning of Foxtons, love it or hate it, it is a brand. Have you ever considered the franchise model, which seems to deliver more stability in the operating results?
Great question. Firstly, Dexter's, as a competitor, being private equity backed, there are a number of private equity backed consolidators within the marketplace. We're very, very proud on the acquisitions that we've made. A number of those recent acquisitions were made completely off market without having to go through a competitive process at all. That's the importance of having our brilliant in-house acquisitions team. All they do, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is talk to business owners, start that conversation, and sometimes that yields results very quickly. Other times we might be talking to a business for 2 or 3 years until they're in a position and ready to sell. But when you look at the fragmentation of the market, we are today by far London's largest estate agency brand for both sales and lettings. We've got around about 5 or 6% market share. There is a huge amount for us to still go for of those 3,600 agencies across London. So I think there's more than enough to go around. We're not overpaying for these businesses. You can see the returns that we're getting for them. And at the moment, we are investing amount of cash that our business is delivering. And of course, as we get towards that 25 to 30 and beyond in the longer term, we'll be able to make bigger and bigger acquisitions. Second question, a franchise model. I love the franchise model, but you've got to have huge volume to be able to make it profitable. But it is a completely different business operating model to an owned estate agency where we have got, across London, 58 leases that we've got probably, in most cases, 10-year contracts on those leases. We've got enormous control over our employee group. That's how we drive productivity. That's how we can afford to invest to get the best people and to turn them into the best negotiators in London. We can't do that with the franchise model. Outside of London, where the values are a lot lower, the revenues are much lower, I think a franchise model is attractive in certain areas, but you've got to be going for volume before it really gets off the ground. If we started to try to take Foxtons and do 1, 2, 3, 4 offices, we'd be in a loss-making position for a very long time until we get enough volume to start to make long-term profitability.
Thank you. I like your slides very much. If I can get a copy of it, give you my email. Anyway, my question is, what is your profit-wise, what is your vision of Foxtons during the coming years, especially with respect to the budget we are all expecting, and it would be a very political budget. What are your thoughts? Thank you.
I think we all agree it will be a political budget. That's the beauty of having 28,000 lettings contracts. You know, many of these contracts will be multi-year contracts. That revenue, that income is guaranteed. So I think certainly for the profitability side of our business, we feel it is extremely resilient. You only need to look at what happened over COVID. You know, our lettings revenue didn't dip. It was very, very predictable and very reliable. Obviously, the big unknown is what's going to happen with capital gains, what's going to happen with potential changes in stamp duty. That will be a sales-led impact, but I think coming off the back of last year, you can't imagine an environment where you'll see fewer sales transactions than the worst year that we've seen since the global financial crisis and COVID. So we're using that as our base worst case scenario. And actually, even with that worst case scenario, as you've seen from the slides, we're getting very close to getting this sales side of the business back into profitability because we've grown the market share so much.
Basically, you are hopeful.
I'm not hopeful. I'm determined that if you look at our growth in our market share, that continued trajectory, even based on a very small number of transactions, we're going to be back in profit. And we look at this. We have got thousands of KPIs that we look at that are delivered to us live every single day. We start our week with our heads of departments, grooming through all of the data that we've seen from the last week. We're looking at trends. We have a team of data scientists downstairs. We're listening to the business and we're looking very closely at the performance. And if we see anything changing in the dynamics of the market, then we can take very quick actions to make sure that we're still delivering profit come the end of the year.
Thank you very much.
Just a couple of quick questions. You said that you got 27,000 lettings. Do you have a split off or breakdown of how many are UK nationals and how versus foreign nationals?
I'd be pulling a number out the air if I told you. We have got that number. I don't know what it is today.
Okay.
Yeah, but the clients who are our landlords make up circa between 20 to 30% are overseas landlords. Right. If we have got very, very intense, very forensic data on our lettings tenants, where we can see the spread of everywhere in every country across the world where they come from. We look at their age groups, we look at their educational background, we can see whether they're students or whether they're working, what industry they're in, and that really does help us think about how we position the business to the outside world as well.
Mm-hmm. Secondly, if you, and thanks for that, believe what they say in the newspapers, a lot of people are leaving London to go abroad because of taxation policies of the future budget.
Yep.
Have you noticed that at all in your
No. I mean, as I say, we're registering 600,000 people a year to rent on the market at any one time, 2,000 properties. The dynamics, the extreme differential between supply and demand in the London lettings market is enormous. We don't see that getting back to any kind of balance anytime soon. And even if you lost 5%, if there was 5% negative migration, it's not going to affect the number of people who need to rent a property in London. It might affect a very, very small number at the top, but you've still got such limited supply that it's not going to make any difference to those units being rented very quickly.
Time for one more. Tim?
Definitely. This man definitely deserves his turn.
He does. I'm very patient.
Yeah, at last. For your mortgage business, is that mainly recurring revenue or is it one-off revenue, given that there's, particularly for the rearranged mortgages, there's always an upfront fee which a mortgagee has to pay
It's a great question. It's 50-50 split, almost exactly 50-50 split. 50% is the new arrangements for new mortgages that we're providing leads from the sales side of our business, and the other 50% of the revenue that they make is from our reoccurring remortgage part of the business. So that's a really nice reoccurring part of their business. It's perfectly hedged.
Okay, lovely.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Guy and Chris.
Thank you.